such a vital resource, water is often at the center of debate over how we should use it, sell it, share it, own it, keep it safe, and very importantly, conserve it. But water is even more than just the uses of it. It infuses our history, beliefs, imagery, and imaginations. One of my favorite authors, Jeanette Walls, wrote this in her book, Half-Broke Horses. The water you kids were playing in had probably been to Africa and the North Pole. Genghis Khan or St. Peter or even Jesus may have drunk it. Cleopatra might have bathed in it. Crazy Horse might have watered his pony with it. Sometimes water was liquid. Sometimes it was rock hard, ice. Sometimes it was soft, snow. Sometimes it was visible but weightless, clouds. And sometimes it was completely invisible, vapor, floating up into the sky like the souls of dead people. There was nothing like water in the world. It made the desert bloom, but also turned rich bottomland into swamp. Without it, we'd die, but it could also kill us, and that was why we loved it, even craved it, but also feared it. Never take water for granted. Always cherish it. Always beware of it. I think Arthur C. Clarke sums it up nicely when he says, "How inappropriate to call this planet Earth when it is clearly ocean." If you have been looking for a congregation where your beliefs are respected, griefs are comforted, joys are celebrated, your children are taught about other religions, concerns are shared, reason is honored, and your need to serve others is fostered, then perhaps you have found your home. Welcome to Tapestry, a Unitarian Universalist. First of all, I'd like to invite Linda Juergen to come up and tell us a little bit about the upcoming service auction.
I know you log on to YouTube to watch funny cat videos, or monkeys tormenting cats, or heroic dogs with soldiers, or even honey badgers, or to see Donald Trump saying, well, he started it. Or you turn into YouTube like me to find out how to do something. How to cast on knitting stitches, or how to fix your printer, or how to replace the wheel on your dishwasher tray, or step-by-step instructions on doing watercolor paintings. YouTube is really good for entertaining yourselves and your grandchildren, and also learning about all kinds of stuff. So with that as your inspiration, log on to YouTube on Saturday, April 16th, when Tapestry hosts our YouTube dinner and auction. This is a fundraiser that happens twice a year, and it will be very entertaining and instructive. It will answer questions like, what shall I do with my life for the next 6 months? Whom can I meet here at Tapestry? Where will I go on my next weird adventure now that I've been to the alpaca farm already? What can I do to entertain my friends and make a little cash for the congregation? Or you can just have dinner and watch the funny clips Bill Medina comes up with. The cost is $15 for adults and $5 for kids. The kids will have their own auction as well when they bring their used toys in that they're tired of. We're having Mexican food, and Chef Kathy will have some vegetarian options. So please sign up with Cheryl after the service and support our very own Tapestry on YouTube.
And can I add, we have 23 auction items.
Don't forget, immediately after the service and before the brunch, we will be having a special short membership meeting to vote on 3 things that the Board of Trustees needs to move ahead on our potential purchase of a building for Tapestry's new permanent home. If you are a member, please stay so that we can take care of these important decisions. If you're not a member, please stay to learn about this important step in Tapestry's future. Then stay for the brunch, whether you brought a crazy hat or not. Now I'd like to ask Sheila Raymond to come forward. She'd like to say a few words about our upcoming capital campaign.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Some of you young people, or your newer people, can't know how it just fills my heart to see this room with so many old and new faces. We really go back a ways. Going back to the late 80s, am I coming across okay? This is kind of echoey. The 1980s, that is. I, a native of Los Angeles, I hope this doesn't sound too scripted because it is, had been living out of state for 3 or 4 years and was starting over after a painful divorce. I had never lived in Orange County before. I was an LA girl, West LA, and was in search of a faith community. Raised in a non-observant Jewish home, I had some scant knowledge of UUism, enough to know that it fit me. I was really looking for a way to make new friends and integrate into a county that was as foreign to me as the state of Hawaii. It started slowly in a former incarnation of Tapestry called Saddleback UU in Mission Viejo. From there, it went viral, although we didn't know it at that time. All Souls UU congregation split from Saddleback for a while, joined together again as UU Church of South Congregation, Congregation of South County a few years later, and grew until today, where we have reached and outgrown this home here on Madero. I had no experience with congregational life. I didn't know a pledge from a hedge. Moreover, I was fairly unskilled working mother of 3 and lived from paycheck to paycheck. My very first pledge was $10 a month. It was all I could afford at the time, but it was appreciated. I soon married again and managed to integrate my late husband, Ken, into the occasional service or social event. He had a saying, "If there's food involved, I'll be there." He was a golfer and had no real interest in spending Sunday mornings listening to a sermon, but he loved the people we were meeting as I did. I could go on and on all day about the times we had and how Tapestry grew like Topsy, as the saying goes. We became an official welcoming congregation to GLBT folks, and we did some other stuff. We had dinner parties. We went to auctions and their events. I discovered De Benneville Pines one year and returned again and again. We pledged incrementally more each year. I could not stay away. Then in early 2009, I was diagnosed with cancer. It was the beginning of a long journey through hell on our hands and knees. I'm not exaggerating. I was not expected to live, spent 8 months in the hospital and in and out of a nursing home. Ken, who was 16 years older than I, had to batch it all that time. The support we got from this congregation, community, was overwhelming. It really was. The visits, the food in the surgery waiting room from some people in this room, you know who you are. I'm not naming people because I would probably leave somebody out. The notes from the RE kids and the prayers. People I did not even know prayed for me. It worked. I lived to tell about it. And my husband, who had lost his first wife to cancer, was never alone unless he wanted to be. About a year went by, and during that time, Ken was getting more frail. When he entered the hospital in November of 2012, he always had visitors from Tapestry. After 7 weeks, he passed away into a more comfortable place at the age of 87 from respiratory failure. The memorial service filled this room. It's here somewhere. And it helped me and my family through the worst of times once again. The sudden, unbearable loss of Ken's son, Brian, back in 1993. 9 people from our tiny, or then tiny, congregation showed up in the Hollywood Hills for the memorial service. Oh, and did I mention the best of times? The birth of my first grandchild 16 years ago. I now live in Los Angeles, San Pedro, actually. Tapestry is part of my heart now, and I still cannot stay away. And my financial situation has also grown incrementally. I'm proud to say that I've decided to make a huge financial gift to Tapestry for our upcoming capital drive. And I mean huge, to paraphrase Bernie Sanders. For me, it's the right thing to do, and I'm very grateful that I'm able. Tapestry has become my 4th child. I've been around long enough to know about our dream to have a home of our own, from our church in a box days and through the loss of some very special Tapestry friends to today. I've been around long enough to know that the people who sit at the helm of leadership and financial decisions are capable, competent, and trustworthy. Some of the best friends I've ever made, the finest people I've known in my 74 years, are part of this Tapestry family of faith. That's my love letter to this place I care so deeply about.
Thank you, Sheila. You can find information about our various events in your order of service or on the website. Our various groups and events reflect our vision of being a transformational home for liberal spirituality and a dynamic community leader in Orange County and beyond. And now, Marilyn Schroeder will light our chalice, the central symbol of our Unitarian Universalist heritage. Each morning, we must hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry, and give back. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to the community, and to each other. Please join me in saying our covenant, followed by our song of affirmation. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another.
And so we gather, thirsty for connection with ourselves, thirsty for connection with others, thirsty for connection with the larger life. May all who gather here be filled with joy and hope, with compassion and love. May we be filled so that we may pour ourselves out again into this world in need. As we gather to worship, we pause to remember the joys and sorrows in our midst. Some do that by lighting a candle in silent recognition, and some share a note or an email. This note comes from Kelly and Eames Wilson, newer folks to our community. They say that 1 year ago, we lost our baby, Arlo, and Eames wants to say, we love you and miss you. And we're happy that Dad will be home this month. That is awesome. We think that Dad may be deployed with Scott, which is just an astounding coincidence. So thanks for sharing that. And would you all join me with our congregational response? For your joys, we join you in celebration. For your sorrows and concerns, may you feel our compassion. For all that is spoken and unspoken, may the caring of our beloved community sustain you. And I have a story for those young and young at heart, if you want to join me up front on the carpet. A drop of water. Yes, there can be stories about drops of water, I promise. So come on up, and we have a few pictures to go with this story. So once upon a time, there was a drop of water named Higgins. But Higgins was no ordinary drop of water. Higgins was a drop with a dream. Higgins lived in a valley where it hadn't rained in a very long time, so all the beautiful grass had turned brown, and the flowers were wilting, and the trees were starting to droop. Higgins had a dream that one day the valley would be a beautiful place again, but what could he do? After all, he was just one drop of water. One day, Higgins decided to travel and tell the other drops about his dream. And all the other drops listened very politely. And Higgins, they said, get your head out of the clouds. You can't spend your whole life dreaming. And Higgins decided that he had to do something to make his dream come true. So he began to think and think and think. And one day, as he was walking by, he saw a rusty old bucket and got an idea. If enough of us drops of water got together in this bucket, he thought, there might be enough water to sprinkle on a few flowers and to help them grow again. So eagerly, Higgins told everybody about his idea, but they didn't fall for it. Higgins is nothing but a dreamer, they said. So Higgins decided he had to do something to convince the others. So he said to them, I don't know about you, but I'm getting into that bucket. I hope some of you will join me. Then with all of his might, he ran and he ran and he jumped through the air and landed with a kerplunk in the bottom of the bucket. And there he sat, just a drop in the bucket. For a long time, Higgins was lonely in the bottom of that bucket. And it seemed like no one else was going to join him. But after a while, some of the other drops could see that the grass was brown and the flowers were wilting and the trees were drooping, and they decided that something had to be done. Suddenly, one other drop shouted, I'm going in that bucket with Higgins. And he leaped through the air and landed, kerplunk, in the bucket. Then two drops yelled, wait for us. And they hopped through the air and landed in the bucket, and then 10 drops jumped through the air, and then 30 and 50, then hundreds of drops came from all around just to hop in the bucket. Soon the bucket was completely full of water. But there were still more drops that wanted to join, so they found another bucket and hopped in. Before long, there were 2 buckets of water, and 3 and 4 and 10, then hundreds and thousands of buckets of water. And along came a powerful breeze that blew over all the buckets, and all the water flowed together to make a mighty stream. Everywhere the water flowed, the grasses turned green again, and the flowers bloomed, and the trees stood tall and straight once more. All of that happened because Higgins had a dream, and his dream came true. Because he knew that although he was just a drop in the bucket, enough drops in the bucket make a bucket full. And when there are enough buckets with the wind behind them, then justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. So before you guys go to class today, I want to invite Miss Karen to come up here. You guys have had fun with her for how long? A few months? 4 months, my goodness. So Miss Caitlin is coming back next Sunday, and Karen is going back to her church. So we wanted to thank her for the fun times that we've had together and wish her well in her adventures at her own church. The RE committee also has a lovely plant for you that I absent-mindedly left on my kitchen table. But it will be in the office this week, and here's a card for you. Thank you. So we will see you all in a little bit after your classes. See ya, humba coop. See ya, Let's take just a moment for silent meditation. If you can sit back, relax, take a couple of deep breaths, and be embraced by the wisdom of the shared silence of this community. Namaste. Amen, and blessed be. This past week, I was driving my car around listening to NPR. I was only halfway paying attention because I was running errands or going to the gym or something. And the topic of the show was climate change. The guest said something about sea level changes and the likelihood that these sea level changes would rise enough to inundate coastal cities around the world. Los Angeles would be dramatically impacted. I'm driving along, global warming, blah, blah, blah. And then it sort of clicked in my head that this guest speaker said something about this century. I didn't really connect the dots until I got out of the car. I wasn't sure if I had understood it correctly. I had to do a little more research. Mind you, this was a couple of days before it was on the cover of the New York Times. NPR picked it up earlier. And yes, I was right. Studies tell us that sea levels have been pretty much the same for 2,000 years. But they began to climb measurably in the 20th century. The rate has been slow, but it's expected to speed up. Oceans are expected to rise 2.5 to 6.5 feet by the end of this century. That's enough to inundate major cities around the world. It's not the rise that surprised me so much as the timing. This century. In the scope of our human lives, especially now as long as we live, a century isn't all that long. It's a few generations at the most. We're not talking about some strange Jetsons far off future world. We're talking about 2100. That's a year that the youngest members of our community will likely live to see. It won't be some post-apocalyptic wasteland, but it will be dramatically different from the world that we know and love. Now, water, in a lot of ways, is at the forefront of our environmental challenges and opportunities. Sea level rise threatens our coasts, and clean drinking water is an increasingly scarce commodity. Storms now endanger the most vulnerable people around the globe, and droughts threaten food production. There's also a less obvious role that water plays in our relationship with the earth, and it's tears. For a moment, I want to talk about the tears that have been shed and will be shed over our losses. And I know tears sounds very dramatic, but it sounds dramatic only because a lot of us, including myself, have avoided any real depth of feeling when we hear about environmental devastation. Really listening closely, exploring the reality of what is happening to our planet is painful. And when we avoid our grief, we use that powerful and all-encompassing tool of denial. As long as we're in denial about our grief, will continue to exploit the earth. This is important because ecofeminist Joanna Macy argues that in order to make a real meaningful action to confront environmental exploitation, we have to first get real with the grief of our loss and our potential loss. For a lot of those folks, the loss is very material, it's concrete, it's losing homes and livelihoods. But the rest of us face a different kind of loss. Big changes are coming by the end of the century, and it's not just the coastline that will change dramatically. Around the globe, ecosystems that support species are changing dramatically. And there's a psychological loss that comes with that. Philosopher Katie McShane writes, "Our sense of our own national and religious identities often depend on the presence of other species. Imagine Greece without olives. Imagine India without mangoes, Ireland without grass. How would Americans feel about a world in which California has no more redwoods, Minnesota doesn't get snow, Kansas can't grow wheat, and Louisiana has no more crawfish?" A lot of our sense of identities and our histories, our stories about what life is, have been shaped by our natural environments. The problem isn't so much that the world is changing. It always changes. That's what living things do. The problem is that it's changing at a much faster rate than any species is prepared to keep up with. Our culture and our identity is not going to keep pace, and we will feel adrift, unable to be helped by the knowledge passed down to us from our elders and our cultural traditions. Joanna Macy says, "Don't be afraid of the dark. This is a dark time, filled with suffering and uncertainty. Like living cells in a larger body, it's natural to feel the trauma of our world. So don't be afraid. For the responses arise from the depth of your caring and the truth of your interconnectedness with other beings." Occasionally, we ministers see churches falling by the wayside, and we wonder, what is the future of liberal religion in the 21st century? Like our natural environments, religious life will change dramatically in our future. And a lot of those conversations, ministers speculate that our future role may be to help us grieve our collective losses over the environment. On church, I've said this 1,000 times, Tapestry is one of the few places that you can come and be brokenhearted. We don't tell people to cheer up or put on a brave face. In times of grief, people here will care for you and show you compassion, but they will not try to fix you. As we continue to focus on climate justice through April, we need to remember that tears are a real part of this journey. Tears aren't the end of the journey, but they're real, and they have a very important role. In our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we use the metaphor of an interconnected web a lot. It's one of the few principles that people can actually remember. This morning, though, in our reading, we heard about the water that connects us to the rest of existence. The same stream of life that runs through my veins night and day runs through the world and dances in rhythmic measure. It's the same life that's rocked in the ocean cradle of birth and death in ebb and flow. So far in my life, I've had only a handful of, I guess, what you would call a mystical experience. moments of deep awareness of interconnection. A few of those have involved bodies of water, but one of them in particular is especially vivid in my mind. It was a full sensory experience: visual, tactile, auditory, emotional. When I lived in Denver, Colorado in seminary, I was just a short drive from some absolutely amazing hiking in the Rocky Mountains. One of my favorite hikes was just a short ways beyond Boulder, and I really don't remember the trailhead or the mountain that it climbed, but at the top of this trail, where it crossed over this mountain ridge, and there was this small patch of snow, even in the spring and fall, probably in the summertime too. And that beautiful, pristine snow above where any of the trees grew melts, drop by drop. And it feeds a stream that runs down the western slope of the Rockies, feeding Boulder Creek that connects with the Platte River, and it ultimately feeds into the Mississippi and the Gulf of Mexico. And there's something about being there at the source as this snow melts in summer. It's an opportunity to see and experience the interconnection of our earth in dramatic slow motion, one drop at a time. Like the stream of life that runs through our veins night and day, the stream of life also connects every corner of our earth. Now, of course, the water that connects us is not just pristine snowmelt. It's also toxic and corrosive. This year, I think all of our consciousnesses were raised by the crisis in Flint, Michigan. In order to cut costs, local governments switched the source of the city's drinking water from Lake Huron to the Flint River. And that change exposed about 10,000 children to lead in their drinking water. When I hear this story, I often have to remind myself that the lead in that water didn't come from a different water source. The alternate water source, the Flint River, was so polluted that it corroded the lead pipes, which is where the lead came from. Now, this large body of water flowing day and night that is so polluted it eats away at lead pipes. It too is part of the stream that runs through our veins. The connection to the Flint River water crisis can also be seen in a flow of money, in a web of exploitation and deregulation and greedy capitalism that enabled American manufacturing to leave its environmental burden at the feet of poor people of color. No one wants to say this, but we all benefited from the Flint water crisis too. We drove cheaper cars. We enjoyed the benefits of a highly competitive American economy. Whether it's a stream of money or a stream of water, we are all caught in this network of mutuality. Water reminds us of the tears shed over environmental degradation. It reminds us of the stream of life that connects us all. It's such a powerful force of nature that it pops up in nearly every religious tradition that I'm familiar with. And it symbolizes different things. In most of them, it's a symbol of purity and calmness. We use it here in our water communion to represent coming together after our different journeys over the summer. But I think in our culture, probably the most powerful images of water from religion come from the Hebrew Bible. Now, who can forget that great flood that Noah survived? It's one of the several similar myths of flood stories from around the world. The story says that because of humanity's misdeeds, God decided to flood the entire earth, returning it to a pre-creation state of watery chaos. It's a momentary reversal of the creation story. It's a terrifying picture of a God and our world. Then, in the very next book of the Hebrew Bible, in Exodus, water becomes the symbol of liberation for an individual and liberation for a community. Remember when Moses was just an infant, his mother saved him from genocide by placing him in a raft to float down the Nile. And then, of course, years later, under Moses' leadership, the Israelites crossed the Red Sea to escape slavery under the Pharaoh. According to the story, Moses held out his staff and God parted the Red Sea so the Israelites could walk through on dry ground. Moses then removed his staff, and the Israelites had crossed the sea, got to the other side, but the Egyptian army was drowned. I looked through my little Bible dictionary to find where water is used, and it's everywhere and means 1,001 different things. From death and destruction to rebirth and salvation, there's no single thing that water clearly symbolizes. It's profoundly dangerous, though, but totally essential for survival. It's that dangerous, ambiguous piece that makes our song "Wade in the Water" so beautiful. In its 4 verses, "Wade in the Water" refers to different pieces of both the Old Testament and the New Testament. A lot of people believe that the song was used to instruct runaway slaves to wade through streams during their escape, in order to cover their scent from dogs that might be sniffing out their trail. What better metaphor for this unspeakably dangerous and life-saving journey? Just as our human lives depend on water to drink, our spiritual lives call us to wade into the dynamic, sometimes murky, places of uncertainty. We're drawn to wade knee-deep into the challenges of our time. LGBT rights, immigration reform, racism, economic inequality, reproductive injustice. We've been called to lean into the question, to wade out into the uncertainty. No one wants to go there alone. Perhaps if we wade in together, it will be possible. Perhaps together we'll find strength to cry tears for our earth. Perhaps we will find courage to demand change. Perhaps together we'll find wisdom for new ways of living. Amen.
We extinguish this flame, knowing the light remains in the warmth and compassion of our hearts until we are together again.
Let us wade into, actually join hands. Take the hand of someone near you for just a moment. Let us wade into the uncertain, murky waters. Let us lean into the uncomfortable. Let us be moved to let go, to splash, to swim, to dive into the stream of life. Now go in peace and let the light within you be a blessing to the world.